and pass it over to my colleague, Julie Tanaka. Very brief introduction for Julie. I cajoled her into joining us back when Julie was the director or head of ASU Libraries' Department of what's called Distinctive Collections, also known as Special Collections in other libraries. Julie has since moved on to bigger and better things, but because Julie's loyal and ride or die, Julie came all the way here from where she currently serves as the director of Distinctive Collections at Occidental College in California, and I'm so grateful to Julie for staying committed to the project, making the trip from LA, coming over here on a flight like a true jet setter. She's going to be on a plane back to LA today. Give it up for Julie Tanaka, please, my friends.
Can you bring my slide deck up? And our tech guys, are we okay? It's on. Yeah, it's on. As Matt plays with technology, you're going to find out that I have a hard time doing two things at once. So if the slides aren't quite up with what I'm saying, I apologize. It's good to be back here today for this event. As Matt said, I left ASU about 5 months ago, just over 5 months ago. But I'd like to thank Matt for convincing me not to back out and to actually make an appearance here today. And I'm sorry there's this awful poll here. So I'm going to come over here as well. And so thank you, Matt, and for putting on this wonderful show. You're going to notice that there's a theme here as well. I'd also like to thank our other team members, Steve and Steve, but that's confusing, so Pine and Semkin, as well as the Map and Geospatial team, especially Peyton. Yes, you heard the big thing about her already. But even more so because yesterday I emailed her at 3:30 saying, you wanted the slide deck at 4? Not going to happen. I'll get it to you maybe at 8 or 9 tonight. It's a good thing California and Arizona are in the same time zone right now, at least for the next 3 weeks. Also our invited speakers and all of you who have come out today, both here in person and those of you attending virtually online. So I'm a humanist by training, I'm a historian, and then I'm also a rare books curator, in addition to the new administrative stuff. So I want to start off here by finding the proper slide. Are we on the mouse or are we on the arrow click? All right. So Wallace Stegner, you all have heard of him, right? American novelist, environmentalist, historian, kind of a polymath in some ways, wrote this. No report written as this one is written, so he's referring to the Tertiary History, would now be published by any government bureau. No illustrators like Moran and Holmes would be permitted to illustrate it. So I'm sorry, Steve, GPO won't publish you because he's very literary. So these are the words that appear in the introduction to the 1977 reprint to the monograph of the Tertiary History. What does this mean? What's he talking about? I sat there, I scratched my head, I'm like, I don't know. Oops. I guess I'm going to talk some more without that one. So this raises some questions for me, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a geologist in any way, shape, or form. I don't know a whole lot about the Grand Canyon aside from what I've learned working on this project. As a matter of fact, I've never been there in person. Don't hold that against me. But the question came to my mind is, what's so special about this book that it's housed down in distinctive collections here? It's like, it's a government publication, who cares? You know, it's just some other random thing there. So that was in my head. I'm like, why does it deserve a space on the shelf, and space is really precious in special collections, next to the landmarks of Western printing like the Gutenberg Bible or the Nuremberg Chronicle? No, there's no Gutenberg Bible here. There's a leaf. Or even like the papers of the influential Nicaraguan poet Rubén Darío. I don't know. These are the questions that I'm going to address today, though, because what I'm trying to do is to bring to you aspects of the rare book itself, the process that goes into making this rare book and what makes it so special, and you're going to get my added commentary throughout because I'm thinking like a rare books person. What catches my eye? Because what catches my eye about this piece here is probably, I would guarantee, as a matter of fact, very different than what catches either Steve's eye or Steve's eye. They might think, oh, that's kind of cool. So this all starts with the government publication, as Matt alluded to earlier. In the latter parts of the 1860s, there was a high demand from industries for natural resources, right? 1860s, going out and have to find all this stuff. So as a result, the Commissioner of the General Land Office, Joseph S. Wilson, asserted a need that we have to go out and assess the mineral resources in the US. So they launched a series of explorations, but then there's this minor interruption. It's called the Civil War. So after the Civil War ended in 1865, the US Congress authorized explorations to study the geology and natural resources of the lands west of the Mississippi. This was those bizarre lands out there that no one had seen before, we don't know a whole lot about. Right. So from 1867 to 78, well, I shouldn't say the first expedition, the expedition along the 40th parallel, this is essentially the route of the Transcontinental Railroad. Then, between 1872 and 79, the lands west of the 100th meridian. This is essentially the Rocky Mountain region as well as the eastern parts of Utah. So the 100th meridian is in the diagonal-ish orange line there on the map, for those of you who can't see the actual meridian. Between 1967 and 78, then they ventured out to the states of Nebraska and Wyoming, or what become the states of Nebraska and Wyoming in that area. And then, of our interest today, the exploration between 1869 and 79 of the Rocky Mountain region, which included the Colorado River, the Green River, as well as the Grand Canyon. And it's this last region here, the Rocky Mountain region, that's of particular interest to us today. And you've seen at least one of the pictures up here already a few times. In March of 1879, the 45th Congress established the USGS. Oops, back up, I'm jumping ahead. John Wesley Powell here on the left, he was a professor of geology at Illinois Wesleyan University and then went on to another Illinois university after that. Pictured with his boat Emma Dean on the left. Anyone recognize the setting? You're laughing. So Emma Dean's parked out in the Grand Canyon. Powell made a couple of early attempts to explore this region. It's kind of out of his own pocket. His explorations in 67, 68, 1867, 68, that is. He went out and he explored, looking at a lot of the plants and fauna out there. His 1868 exploration is extremely important in terms of the botanical collections for the United States. Most of his sketches that come from this and his discoveries in the National Herbarium, which is part of the Smithsonian Institutions. There's more rare materials there, right? Very important. But it's his expedition of 1869 that is of interest and importance to all of us today here, or at least I hope it is. And this was his exploration of the Green and Colorado rivers. It's the backdrop for all of the great maps that we're going to see in here. And resulting from this expedition that he started in 1869, we get the first detailed descriptions of the canyons of the Colorado Plateau. So, in March of 1879, the 45th Congress, I started this earlier, but now I'm back to it in its right place. The 45th Congress established the United States Geological Survey. Here's the foundational document. So as a rare books person and an archivist, this is what's important to me. I want to see the real stuff here. There's a House of Representatives bill that established the USGS, and the USGS from this point in time took on the responsibility for the surveys of the Western Territories that I described earlier. Powell then became the second director in 1881. And it was during his second year as director that the USGS issued its official first official monograph. And this was Clarence Dutton's Tertiary History of the Grand Cañon District, with atlas, mind you. As a side note, even though it was the first publication for the USGS, the first official one in this series, it actually bears the title Monograph 2. Monograph 1, though it says Monograph 1, didn't get published until I think 8 years later in 1890. And it was about Lake Bonneville, and you'll see something from that a little bit later in the talk. So keep that in mind. In its original publication, it came out in an issue or a run of 3,000 copies. Not a whole lot. So let's take a look at this for a moment, just what makes it so special? Why is it in special collections? This is still on my mind, right? Why does that deserve shelf space in special collections? Well, take a look. Here on the right is the title page for the atlas, and then there's this thing right here. It's a nice engraving, and it's like, oh, it's a pretty decoration. You know, this comes out, it's early, that's wonderful. So I sent out an email saying, anyone know about this? I can't find anything about it. And I had some suggestions, thank you, by the way, and I was like, but something's weird. So I kept looking around, emailed a couple other people, and this is where I am right now. I think it's the early seal for the USGS, because I took this part here, right, this center section, which is up here, and I started digging around, and with some help, uncovered this one. This is a current logo for the USGS. It's on their flag. That design, though, came out in 1903. And it's a rock hammer and a rock pick crossed, triangle behind it, which is some sort of symbol in the geology world about surveying. I'm not a surveyor, so I can't tell you exactly what that meant. Surrounded by the 13 stars. And so the motif here is similar. You see the cross tools here, and then the stars up there. There's 19. I can't figure out why there's 19 rather than 13, but oh well. So anyway, we have the very early kind of formings of the USGS of what they're describing themselves as, trying to figure out their identity. And then you'll notice on the bottom here, Government Printing Office, 1882. So government publication. So in this history with Atlas, Dutton synthesized both from Powell's expedition and from the other surveys of the Western Territories. And he wrote in this really elegant, beautiful literary style. And then he supplemented, as Matt showed you in the initial round of slides, with these gorgeous maps, topographic, geographic maps, as well as panoramas. But all of this brings me back to the words that we started with from Wallace Stegner. This right now, this literary style with these images from these two really renowned artists, GPO would never publish this again today, right? So that's in my head too. So that makes me think that there's no place for literary style in a government publication, let alone artwork, that it should just be straight and to the point, facts. But where does the work of these two men come in? Why these two artists? Good question. Let's think about it. So here we are. We're still thinking about this. I told you Lake Bonneville would come back to us. So this is what we see of kind of a typical government publication in my mind, just facts. The outline of Lake Bonneville was intricate. Its shores presented a succession of promontories and deep bays. I cut off there because the rest of it is very much in the same style, just straight facts and description. But then you have Dutton's piece here. Beyond its opening, we see the grandeur, and this is from the monograph, of the central canyon with butte beyond butte. To many spectators, the dominant thought here might be that it is stupendous work has been accomplished by some intelligence akin to the human rather than by the blind forces of nature. Little commentary in there, a little color. Literary. Some of you may disagree with me because it's, I guess, a first subjective statement, but different in tone than what you see up top, right? Everyone agree? Yeah, excellent. All right, so when we look at sheet 18, remember the two artists I showed you before? This is sheet 18, transept, Kaibad division, Grand Canyon. Personally, I think this type of artistry matches what we see in the literary style in the monograph. Again, you may disagree, but I'm going to make that statement, so we're running with it. And this is just one of 10 awe-inspiring views that fill that book sitting over to my left. It's a slim volume, but it's got some stunning pictures in there. So in Sheet 18, the transept, which is this one here. This is from the atlas. Pretty, stunning. What's on the right is a photograph, same area. Any initial impressions about what the significance of these two are, what you get from one and not from the other? I don't want to have to call on people. Someone, anyone? Yes?
Well, I think a piece of art evokes something with your camera, unless you're an incredible photographer, cannot capture in the depth and the perspective and the colors and the shadows. And the one on the left is far more dramatic and captures the feeling of the canyon better than the one on the right, because the one on the right doesn't give a perspective of the depth and the grandeur and the drama of the canyon.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? I'll take one more perspective, because it's not just a world of one perspective, and I totally forgot about all of you on this side, so I'm going to come over here.
And if any brave soul does step up, I ask that you please use the mic, because we all can hear you here in person, but our friends online are just hearing mutedness. So whoever does comment, let me pass the mic to you, please.
One other person. I have an art person sitting in front of me in a plaid shirt here.
Okay.
So what happens when your former colleagues come.
In the photograph, you will not see the detail toward the back of the image that you will in an art piece, because a lot of times the camera will focus on what's closest rather than what's farther away. So you're getting a lot more detail in the artwork.
Yeah, all right, you both are on the same page. Unfortunately, we're all kind of in the same mindset here. It's very much the case. And then on top of that, I'm not a photographer either, so it's the camera on the phone and then it's blurry. But because of the way light and shadow falls when you're taking a photograph, you're not going to be able to catch the same details that you would be able to if you're sitting down drawing something like this, because this is in the artist's full control, right? How you depict something. So you actually get a better, more accurate representation of the stratigraphy of the canyon in this rendition than you do in a photograph. And so often we think, oh, photographs, that's as real as it gets, right? It gets real that we know whenever this particular photograph was taken that there's more greenery on the canyon than there was in this, but it doesn't help us understand the different layers of rock and sediment and everything else that's in there. All right, so the work of Moran and Holmes, awesome. I didn't show you all of them, but showed you a couple of them. This would not have been possible had it not been for the printer. He was an engraver and a printer, German immigrant who left Germany in probably late 1848, early 1849, emigrated to the US because of the political upheaval in the wars of 1848, and established a small print shop in the US. It was known as the New York Lithography and Engraving and Printing Company, and he was just getting it started, so he basically took any work he could get, so he did all kinds of different stuff. In this range, he's most well known for his edition of John Audubon's Birds of America. Here's the wild turkey. And also, he produced quite a few maps, so I put up one from the Civil War, that he did. This is the map from Antietam, 1867. And if you sit here and you take a look, and I'm going to let you gaze quickly at the detail, at the artistry. With him, when he emigrated to the US, he brought a newly developing technology from Germany to the US, and this was chromolithography. At this point in time, the people printing the stuff in the US, the GPO office, the map type of stuff here, they didn't have the ability to print in color, so lithography was still developing here, but in the US is limited to black and white. BN brings the ability to print in color. He was also a really good engraver, so he brought the fine detail work that we don't see in some of the early engravings that was put out in the US. As a matter of fact, the GPO office, they didn't do their own engraving, so they had to contract their work out for a long time. Even though the GPO started in 1861, they were founded in March of 1861, their primary point was to produce works cheaply, or I should say economically efficient, for the American public to bring them information. And so they did that, but they would contract out to get engravers and map producers. So it was when they decided that they were going to print the 1882 monograph and atlas. They could print the monograph, not a problem. That was just black and white text, so they did that. That's on the left. But for the atlas, they had to go out and find someone. And because of the type of work that Bien was doing with the wild turkey and the map of Antietam and others that he did, this caught their attention. They were like, hey, there's this guy out there and he does really good work. So they contracted Bien to produce the atlas that you see over there. So you notice on the title page here, sorry you can't see it from there and I didn't put a detail. It says Washington 1882, so referring to the government printing office, but underneath where you can't read it, it says Julius Bien and Company, New York. So Bien his print shop was in New York, so that actually was printed in New York and not in Washington, D.C. So this brings me back to my question, why is this atlas in special collections? Or here, why is it in distinctive collections? Well, there aren't very many copies. And when you come over here and you look at it, this one is actually in relatively good condition. Right. And if you came up and looked at it earlier, you notice the pages are in good condition. There's not a lot of tears or anything like that in there. It's not always the case. So I was sitting here trying to figure out how I was going to conclude this talk today. This was last Saturday, or week and a half before that, I guess, week before that. I was like, oh, I've got all these digital photos and everything. That's great, but I need to see the thing. I was like, I don't have a copy. I can't just go down to Secure Collections here like I used to. I'm like, oh, so I had to go find one. So fortunately, LA Public Library Rare Books Division, Central Branch, has a copy, so I had to negotiate for a Saturday appointment because they're normally not open on Saturday, but I got myself down there. And fortunately, they have a copy, and if you can see, this is their copy, that's our copy here at ASU. There's a distinct difference. This one has definitely seen better days, and so this made me think about special collections. Why is it here? One, there aren't that many copies of this book. So when the copy resides in special collections at a location where it's publicly accessible, so not in a private collector's hands, but somewhere like LAPL or ASU, people could come in and see it. So it makes that one particular copy accessible to lots of people. So that's one reason why it's in special collections. Also gets protected. So once protected, we can keep it in relatively good condition rather than in someone's, musty basement somewhere. Not good. But this one has seen the ravages of time, and my assumption is it probably has changed hands a couple of times before landing at LAPL. And then I look at it, I'm like, you can see how the paper's starting to fray here. The edges of the book are coming apart. That one has a paper cover, not the original leather covering that is on the one over there. And then I thought about this, well, wait a minute, why we have all these digital images. We have the digital surrogates of the maps, and it's great because you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can view multiple images at the same time on your screen if you have a big enough screen. But I'm sitting at home, and I have an iMac desktop as well as a laptop, and I'm looking at both of them like, So screenshot from my iMac, right? So this is what I see, it was 4 inches. So I took the same thing on the real one, and in 4 inches, that's what you would see. So in my mind, when I'm looking at this on my screen, I see the thing, I'm like, okay, but I don't realize how big it is. And of course, if you're on a big screen like this, it's gigantic, and it's actually not that big, right? So the perspective and size also makes a difference. So if you go in and you can see the actual size, that's something that you can't do with the digital surrogate. So yes, you have to come to special collections to see that. And if you go over, well, please don't do this, but if you were to go over there and pick up the volume, it's pretty thin. It's only like this. It's 23 sheets, right? But there's heft to it. And you're like, why is this thing so heavy? Well, if you come over and you feel the paper, it's pretty thick. If you go over there, there's a reprint. I think that's the 77 reprint. And you feel the pages, much thinner. So come feel this afterwards. Make sure your hands are clean. No white gloves because that actually tears the pages more, but make sure you don't have food residue on it. So after I thought about all this, I'm like, well, it's obvious why this book is in special collections. It's something that should be accessible to all of you who are out there online as well, if you can make it in, for you to come and see the real thing. And this allows you to actually sit down and know for yourself. You don't have to rely on someone else telling you about the book and describing it to you, because my description to you, even though it may look that way, you might sit there and look at the individual details on here, because there are things that you notice on the physical copy that you don't notice in a digital surrogate. So, in my parting thoughts with you today, it's that, one, yes, this book does deserve to be in special collections, but that I appeal to all of you. Special collections is here for all of you. This is not something that's preserved for the senior researcher, the tenured professor working on book number 6. How many books have you put out? Too many, right? Sorry for picking on you. But it really is something for all of you. ASU Distinctive Collections is open to the public. You all can come in, give them a heads up that you want to see this, but you're all able to come in to view this and to sit there and to experience the amazing, amazing work, both scientific and artistic, that is in the atlas. And if you want, you could read the monograph too, because it's not quite as boring as some other things out there. So before I conclude, just a few last thoughts here. Again, image there. More images of the condition. And this one here, also the thing about each book in special collections, it takes on its own identity. So the one at LAPL, you can see it's seen better days, but it's also a proud member of the LPL family, LAPL. Few thanks to other people who helped out in all of this. And of course, being trained as a historian, I have to put my sources up there so people don't say that I plagiarized. So, and that's the end of my talk, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie Tanaka.
I'm gonna let you.
Presentation. And again, extra special thanks to Julie for making the trip all the way from LA. We do have 3 minutes for Q&A. I want to thank Julie for getting us back on schedule after I took us off schedule. Does anyone want to ask Julie a question before we have set up our next speaker? Because I certainly have a question. I'm the proud owner of a 1977 reprint, Peregrine Smith reproduction. Oh, yes, we have one up there, not the original 1882. Julie, do you know anything about the value of these editions? I look around. I like to poke around online sometimes, and I saw that an 1882 in solid shape and as mint as this one here costs upward of $10,000 to $15,000. Do you have any indication of what these things are worth?
Do we have any economists in the audience? Business people? It's all about supply and demand, so it depends. One day it could be worth, the value on it could be $10,000. 2 days later, it might be $500. Depends on the number of copies available, depends on the condition, depends if anyone wants it. If no one wants it, then you can be like, eh. It's kind of like the housing market, right? If there's one house that everyone wants, you can sit there and the price on the house is going to continue to rise. But if you have a house sitting there and no one's interested in it, then they're going to have to drop the price. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen all that often right now. I wish it would. So it's hard to say, Matt. There's no firm answer on what determines the price, but a lot of it is just supply and demand. And if no one wants it, then it's just going to sit there.
I want to hunt down all the tertiary histories and collect them, and then donate them to libraries where they belong, like Indiana Jones.
Well,
like in a museum or a library.
There were 3,000 copies printed, and if you look in WorldCat of the actual printed 1882 edition, I think there's 162 or something like that. So good luck.
Yeah, very cool.
Some of them are probably in people's basements.
Truly, yeah.
Or in the landfill.
Scattered around through antiquarian book dealers, hopefully resurfacing soon after this event. Give it up again for Julie Tanaka, everybody. Thank you, Julie.